Okay, now that we have our quadri-link install completed, we're going to move over and install the subframe connectors. Alright, you want to locate the subframe connectors. Inside the subframe connectors will be your cut templates. They'll be taped to the end of it. Okay, on this template, there's one for the seat platform and one for the floor pan. Okay, now that we have our seat platform cut template trimmed, we're going to put it on the seat platform and lay out our lines. There's holes to be punched out for the through bolts, so it kind of helps you locate the template. And we'll go off the front 2 bolts. Bolt holes. Alright, now that we have our template in place, we'll scribe the opening. This will be the area we'll cut out. And we'll save this piece after the connector's in and reinstall it into the pan. Alright, you'll notice our template doesn't go all the way down to the edge of the pan. We'll just carry this line continuous and down. Same way on this side. And you'll use the same template for the other side. You'll just repeat the process and do the same thing. On this particular car, I've put new floor pans in it and new seat platforms. I haven't welded them in just for the ease of putting the subframe connectors in. But if your car already has everything welded in, you know, we'll cut this out and then you can access the top of the floor pan where the subframe connector will be. So, but if you're putting new floor pans in and you haven't installed your seat platforms yet, that would be a good time to do the subframe connectors. So that way, all you have to do is trim around where the subframe connector will be instead of cutting the big opening out for access. Alright, you'll notice the aftermarket floor pan that's installed in this car has an extra brace. This is like the convertibles have. The convertibles also have this and braces underneath for structure. Alright, when we get our floor pan template laid out and cut, we'll know exactly where we can trim this area so we can gain access to weld to the front of our frame rail. And then once we're done, we'll reinstall this piece and we'll go from there. Alright, in the instructions it has this process to square the subframe with the car. It tells you pick up points to measure from front to rear to make sure the subframe is square, so when you get your connectors in it will be welded to a square frame. I've already squared this frame up in the car, so we won't walk through that right now. We'll just go show you how to locate cut template for the subframe connector. So first thing you want to do, our subframe connectors are 3 inches in width. What we're going to do, okay, this is 3 1/4 inches. So we're going to go 5/8 to the center. Alright, and then off of that center mark, we'll do 1.5 inches. And this will be the same process for a stop subframe also. Okay, the rear part of our subframe connector will be parallel to the rear frame rails. So what we want to do is go to the inside of the frame rail and we'll scribe a line forward. Alright, we'll continue our scribe line onto the floor pan. Floor pan will be the area to be cut out. You'll notice there's a thick reinforcement where the pocket goes in. We won't be cutting any of that. So continue on to the floor pan and you can see our mark here. Okay. And what we want to do off of that mark, we'll go 3 inches over. Our next step, we're going to measure 12 inches off the back edge of our subframe. And it'll be the same for a stock subframe also. So we'll go 12 inches, and we'll scribe a line. Okay, this line will be the front edge. We'll lay our cut template, and that'll also be a cut line. All right, once we have our center lines established in the front and the rear, and also where our cut is going to begin, we'll take a straight edge. We'll line up in the front and line up in the rear. And we'll scribe right here. And we'll also do the same thing for this side. Okay. Now we have a line on both sides in the front, and then a line on each side in the rear. This will be where our cut template will line up. Okay, now we have a cut template in place, and on all of our lines we've laid out. Go down the edge, both sides, and of course the front, and that'll be our cut line. Alright, now we have our cut lines established. You can either go from the bottom side and cut this out, or you can go to the inside. And the way I would do it on cutting it on the inside, go to each corner, show you an 1/8 inch hole, same in the back, and then take your template that you have and go to the inside and lay out your cut lines. That way you don't have to lay underneath the car and get sparks all over you. Alright, you can see our holes we drilled from the bottom side to the top. What we'll do is line up the corners of our cut template to the holes, and we'll tape them down in place. Okay, now you can see where we'll need to trim this section out so we can gain access to the frame rail like we discussed earlier. So I'll just continue a cut straight up on both sides. Alright, next we're going to test fit our subframe connector, see if any further trimming needs to be done. It looks pretty good. Make sure when you slide it in, it goes back and contacts the rear edge to the floor pan, and looks like we're pretty good down the sides. And also underneath, we'll make sure that we're flush to the edge of our frame. Our connector fit and measured for cut the length. We're going to go in and we're going to clean these edges up and get them prepared for welding. Alright, you'll see how close our subframe connector is to our subframe. What we want to do is maintain a gap between these two and ease of getting our bolt and our bushing out. So we'll go a 1/2 inch back from the edge of our subframe, and we'll cut off this area, and we'll put a cap on the end of it. Okay, now we're ready to weld the end cap on the subframe connector before we install it in the car. Okay, now that we have our subframe connector ready to weld in the car, we position it in the car to where it will line up to the back of our subframe and the rear of our frame rail like we talked about earlier. Make sure it's pushed all the way back and centered. Alright, then you have your attaching plates that go to the back edge of your subframe, and then they also weld to your subframe connector. Alright, we'll walk through welding these to the connector, but I won't be welding them to the subframe because this car is still in mock-up stage. So, but if your car is ready to weld in, just proceed and weld fully on both sides and around the perimeter, and then plug welds. Alright, we're going to continue on welding the inside of the car, and then we'll finish up on the bottom and the rear. And like I said, we've already got the front edge welded to the subframe connector, and then the last step would be doing it to the subframe. Okay, now that we've completed welding subframe connector to the floor pan and also where the rear frame rail section ties in, we'll put this brace back in place. So we'll have to trim the bottom of it off. So, alright, now that we've welded the inside, I'm going to come to the bottom and continue welding around the bottom of the subframe connector to our torque box and our frame rail. So it'll wrap around this side, down the back, and around the other side. You can also choose to weld both sides of this for a more sanitary weld. That's what we do here, or if you don't want to do that, you can also seam seal it. Alright, we talked about earlier our seat platforms for this particular car. You know, we replaced the floor pan, so we're not going to have to trim this out. So if yours are welded in, then you'll need to trim this inspection plate out in order to weld the top of the subframe.